Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get back to it here. So if everyone could come in and take their seats. Same rules apply for this as the others. I would remind everybody that you do have the opportunity to submit testimony online should you wish to avail yourself of that option. We're now going to move into the public hearing on House Bill 494 and 498, presented by Representatives Baker and Boyd. Representative Baker, proceed whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for your patience tonight. This is House Bill 494. I'm going to move through this really quickly. The genesis of this bill is to respond to concerns of people in my district and other areas of the state who care about protecting the innocence of our children. In the past few years, there's been an exponential rise in the frequency of events, even in our state, known as drag queen performances or drag brunches or drag queen story hour in their various forms, where in certain cases, children have not only been able to have access, but also have been marketed to and invited to attend when it is posted as an all-ages event or a family-friendly event. So protecting the innocence of our children is something that we've always had a consensus on in our society, and we still have many laws on the books, as have been reiterated throughout this hearing tonight when it comes to children and laws that reflect that. It's not a partisan issue. It's not an issue that targets any specific community or lifestyle behavior. It's just about the freedom to be a child and have healthy development into adolescence. Performances that feature men dressing in a way to highlight an extreme exaggeration of female gender signifiers as well as adult-themed content is sexual in nature. To allow children to attend and even participate, I believe, is harmful. And the consequences of that exposure can significantly alter healthy development for a child. From the many conversations I've had with people around our state, the clear directive is that children don't belong at adult content themed drag queen performances any more than they do at strip clubs or adult theaters, in which we already have laws to address that. And I tend to agree with those people. So what does the bill accomplish with the language? It expands our current adult cabaret statute, Chapter 573, to include a definition of adult cabaret performance. So a performance in a location other than, and I'm reading directly from the bill, other than an adult cabaret that features topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers, male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest, or similar entertainers, regardless of whether performed for consideration. And then in the latter part of the bill, which would be 573-520, it creates an offense of engaging in an adult cabaret performance if on public property or in a location where the adult cabaret performance could be viewed by a minor. And then also a penalty, which is a Class A misdemeanor for a first offense, and a Class E felony for any second or subsequent offense. It also preempts any local ordinance unless a stricter ordinance, I believe, from enacting any ordinances or regulations that would conflict. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would defer to my colleague on her bill.
Representative Boyd, proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you all. I am Maisie Boyd. I am the State Representative for District 2, the Great Northwest. I would like to note that I'm currently the only Gen Z in this body that has filed this legislation. I understand the culture, and I sympathize with what kids are currently facing. Technology and hypersexualization is severely damaging our youth. Until a few days ago, and throughout the course of history, it's been normally agreed upon that we protect children. The sections being amended in my bill were designated to protect children from sexual exploitation and exposure. All I'm asking is that we ensure that this law is properly upheld by including drag shows in the classification of sexually oriented businesses. Prior to the madness of the last few years, it was assumed that we don't take children to drag shows in the same way we don't take children to strip clubs. This is about what's doing best for our children. This is about applying the law equally, and I urge you to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representatives. Questions from the committee? Representative Engel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To inquire.
Proceed.
Good morning. Okay.
Good morning.
So I'm going to start with Representative Baker's bill because they are different. So I want to start with asking you what constitutes prurient interest.
Okay, so that is the definition of that is used, that has court precedents as well, and is used in other places in our statute currently, in current law, is a lustful interest in sexual stimulation or gratification, or material having a tendency to excite lustful thoughts.
Okay. So my question is, and I say this, I mean, it is after midnight, but also as someone who's taught sexual education in high schools, that can encompass a lot of things, sir. And so, like, that definition is kind of in the eye of the beholder.
It is, but it's actually, if you look in statute, it lines out several other things that go along with that when
Such
it comes
as,
to.
because it's not delineated in your bill.
Well, if
Is prurient defined anywhere? Did I miss it?
it's not defined in the bill, but it's defined in statute, not in this bill. So, trying to see if it's in here, actually. It's in our child pornography or obscene. Okay, so if you look on page 3 of the bill, when it talks about nudity and it talks about obscene or any material, there's some definitions there. I'm trying to see where that's at. But it basically talks about, I'll try to just summarize what the rest of that definition talks about, but it talks about, like, if it has any value, like as in art or other things like that, that's kind of what it adds to that definition in statute. I'll look for that if I can find it.
So if the nudity isn't part of art or it is part of art? Because we make nudity exceptions for fine art.
Yes, but it's an or. Or not an or, but and. There's like 3 different things. I'm trying to find it, so I'm sorry about that. I don't have it written down right here. It's in here somewhere. It's just a matter of finding it.
Because I think we can probably agree that folks tend to define obscenity as well as lewdness in a variety of different ways, especially in this town.
I would agree to that. Okay, so one of the definitions here is in Chapter 573-100, and it talks about applying contemporary community standards as its predominant appeal is to prurient interest in sex. That's part of that as well.
So those community standards are going to look different, I'm guessing, in Neosho as opposed to, I mean, even Lee Summit, but Kansas City, right?
Yeah, I would.
So whose community standards are we applying to determine whether or not it meets prurient interest?
So I think it's talking about taking it as a whole. So you would have to look at those court cases and how that they made those determinations about community standards. But I think it's taking the event as a whole. Mm-hmm. Does it have a clear prurient interest that is driven toward sexual thoughts and sexual desires or whatever it might be? And that's how they would make that determination. So
I understand from talking to you previously, offline, and you and I have a great working relationship.
Agreed.
This
Maybe
has been
not
a
this
concern.
late at night.
This has been a concern for you longer than over the last week.
It has. So
Okay.
2 years ago, I filed a bill that tried to deal with this in a different way because it was just regarding the drag queen story hours in libraries, public libraries with public funds.
And so you disagreed with those. Were you saying that there was a prurient interest happening in those drag queen story hours?
That bill also had prurient interest language in it, yes.
Okay. So were you saying that that was happening, that there was lewdness, obscenity happening?
There has been, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you attend those?
No, I didn't attend.
Okay. So the event that happened that kind of spurred this wild rush to have all of these bills was an event that happened in Columbia last week. Is that right?
Not my bill. My bill was filed before that.
Sure. The mad rush to have these hearings.
That's not my decision.
Okay. The public outrage. Was there any prurient interest that you know of?
Are you talking about specifically the Columbia incident? Uh-huh. I watched a partial video of that. I didn't see what my bill would cover.
It didn't meet the standards. So it would not fall within the guidelines.
That's correct.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Okay, Representative Boyd, let's talk about your bill.
Can't wait.
So, and I know that some of my colleagues are going to go further into this, but your language makes zero distinction between drag related to theater, church productions. Several of us are music theater kids in this group. So, I mean, the immediate thought that came to me was Peter Pan, which Peter Pan the musical, the lead has always been played by a woman. And so that would violate your bill. Would it not?
You know, growing up, the Peter Pan movie that I always watched, the man was Peter Pan. So I guess I haven't been to a play.
You haven't seen the musical? No. Okay. South Pacific, Tootsie, Bosom Buddies, Mrs. Doubtfire, MASH.
Yes, I know MASH.
The former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, big fan of doing drag. So all of this would be in violation of your bill.
You know, my bill is just preventing minors from attending. That's,
Musicals? Rodgers
So-
and Hammerstein?
well, in the sexually oriented business, I'll read, this is on page 2, and this is pretty much throughout the entire bill. Sexually oriented business. An adult cabaret or any business which offers its patrons good of which a substantial or significant portion are sexually oriented material, or any nightclub, bar, restaurant, or similar commercial enterprise that provides an audience of 2 or more individuals a drag performance. It shall be presumed that a business that derives 30% or less of its revenue from sexually oriented materials is presumed not to be sexually oriented business. No building, premise, structure, or other facility that contains any sexually oriented business shall contain any other kind of sexually oriented business.
Okay. So do you think that drag is innately sexual in nature?
I do.
Why?
I believe that young children shouldn't see that. You know, I think at this point, like I said in my speech earlier, the hypersexualization of children is rampant. And like my bill exclaims, I believe that it should be included under sexually oriented business. I believe we should be protecting children and not talking about sexuality to them, and hopefully, kind of working towards that.
So do you know how we categorize the differences between gender and sexuality?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
So go ahead. How do you
Sure.
categorize it?
So sexuality is what is in between your legs, and gender is what is in your head. It's between your ears. So gender is your expression of how you identify, whereas sexuality is who you are sexually attracted to.
I only believe in biological sex, male or female.
Okay. So do you think it is detrimental for a daughter to paint her father's fingernails or to put makeup on him?
My
things like
father
that?
never let me do that.
Okay. Well, I think the gentleman sitting to your left probably feels a little differently than that.
I have 4 daughters.
Exactly. Exactly. You might want to tell your co-bill sponsor about it, because that's something that generally happens. My husband, we have a daughter, and he's very secure in his masculinity and allows her to do all like he has tea parties and they play Barbies. And there's nothing sexual in nature with that. And I do want to also talk to you a little bit about grooming as well, because I know that that's been something that we've been talking about in these bills and that there's concern about. And so I investigated child sexual abuse in Jackson County for 7 years. And I never had an alleged perpetrator that was a drag queen. Had a lot of pastors. Unfortunately, had a lot of brothers, had a lot of uncles, next door neighbors, friends of the family. So grooming isn't generally, it's about developing a rapport and a relationship where there's an abuse of power and abuse of trust, and they break down those barriers systemically and methodically in order to gain access to a child to then sexually abuse them. And that is not anything I have ever seen or that has been reported the entire time I worked for the Children's Division. So I just want to be really clear about that. Thank you.
Any other questions for the bill sponsors? Representative Levasco,
To inquire.
proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, morning. Both of you two and I share quite a bit, I think, politically, and it is somewhat unusual for me to be in a position to be critical of your legislation. But I do have some concerns on both of these, mostly on a very technical level. Representative Biggar, I'll start with you. I'm going to assume from your testimony that you're intent with your definition of adult cabaret performance is that the prurient interest be a component of all of the various listed examples. But the structure of the sentence suggests otherwise. I would read this to mean that a go-go dancer or a topless dancer in and of themselves would meet this requirement to be an adult cabaret performance, even if there was no prurient interest involved. You don't define a particular gender involved in the topless dancing. I think the strict reading of your sentence here would suggest a single person by himself, a random guy at a park dancing by himself would be an adult cabaret performance. I'm assuming that's not your intent there, so you might want to look at your syntax.
I'll peruse.
Yeah. To that end, I think we may have a little bit of First Amendment concerns when it comes to regulating performances on public property. I know your intention and you do call out specifically when things can be potentially seen by children. You don't have an actual requirement that any children see the performance, simply that it could be seen. You may want to tighten that up a little bit as well. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Sure. And I would add that, so if you look at 573, 531, when it's talking about businesses and nudity and all of that, minors, there's a part in that statute that says no person shall establish a sexually oriented business within 1,000 feet of any pre-existing primary or secondary school, house of worship, state licensed daycare facility, public library, public park, residence, or other sexually oriented business. If it's that strict in the other part of our statute when it comes to kids, I think my bill is pretty simple when it's just talking about any public location where kids could have access. And if I need to tighten that language up to make it technical, I'll definitely look at that. But I think other parts of our statute's very strict when it comes to kids and sexually oriented businesses. So why would we say that if it's in a building, it's not okay, and it's got to be 1,000 feet from the building, but when it's out in a public park or it's in the library or it's at a restaurant or somewhere else, why would we say that's okay if it's the same kind of content? So that's what I'm trying to get to with the legislation is if the content is not okay for kids in the building, it shouldn't be okay for kids in a public space. However, we need to achieve that.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thought process. I think you just need to be a little bit more clear in how you're wording. And then Representative Boyd, as was mentioned, your definition of drag performance doesn't actually specify any kind of particular sexual component other than defining what a drag performance is. Similarly, I think First Amendment. I think would be difficult to meet a burden to demonstrate that there's harm being provided to anyone based on your definition. I would probably recommend that you probably mirror what Representative Baker had done and at least link it to some kind of explicitly sexual performance. I think that's something that I would certainly be more comfortable with and I think would also stand a legal challenge a little bit easier. So just some feedback there. So.
Yeah, of course, always happy to work with you, Tony, and work with Ben as well. And that's kind of, I think, what we're doing here today. So in regards to drag performance, I do talk about the exhibited gender that is different from the performer's biological sex, using clothing, makeup, markers, and all of that. So, but happy to, of course, tighten up just as Ben would as well.
We'll talk offline. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to take two more representatives, one from the majority and one from the minority, and then I'm going to move into witness testimony so we can get people on the road and they can start to travel. So I will call on a minority member first. Who would like to go? I see Representative Brown. I haven't called on you tonight. Representative Brown.
I'm going to defer to my colleague, Representative Meredith.
Fair enough. Representative Meredith, show's yours.
Thank you. It's a shame that we can't each talk on this and ask our questions. I realize we spent a lot of time on the other bills, but I think that this bill, for what it's worth, Mr. Chair, warrants conversation too, especially when we're talking about the specifics of this. So I would simply ask you might reconsider that decision since we give lots of hours to the other two bills. This is a very different bill and a very different subject.
I'll comment just briefly. So totally understand where you're coming from. I want to have an opportunity for everyone to get some comments on the record, but I do know that all of us know where each other's offices are. My experience with these two representatives is they're very accessible, and I'm sure they'll make themselves available for for comments and questions. But the hour is late, and I do want to get to the
I
witnesses'
think you'll also
testimony.
agree that private conversations have a different value than conversations on the public record.
I
And asking
understand.
questions.
I do understand that you've got your time, so go ahead and make your record and ask your questions. sir.
Advocating for the time of others. Okay, I'll start with Representative Baker's bill. Some of this has already been addressed, so I'll try not to drag it out. Prurient interests, is your intention to mirror obscenity law of what is appealing more to prurient interests than anything else?
As to the definition, probably so, yes.
Okay. As Representative Velasquez said, I think you probably need to change the language just slightly, especially making sure that that applies to all of the other types of dancers listed and the similar entertainers. Otherwise, what I see here is exotic dancers. What does that include?
I think there's a definition of that in the statute.
I don't believe so. If there's a belly dancer at a restaurant, is that now an illegal show? I'm getting there. Or when we get to similar entertainers, which is pretty broad, I wonder if some cheerleading squads would qualify as appealing to prurient interests.
Gentlemen, I think that you realize that that's not what I'm trying to get at.
Well,
if we need to tighten the language, I'm more than happy to do that. But
what I'm getting at
I'm not
is-
trying to ban cheerleaders.
No,
and I'm
what
not
I'm
trying
getting
to
at
ban
is
them.
that's what your language does. And the problem here is there really isn't a way to narrow it. Because what you've expressed concern about is drag shows, which don't actually fit these definitions under obscenity laws.
I disagree.
No, I mean, there's been court cases, it's been discussed, there's First Amendment rights, and what appeals to prurient interest usually has to involve significant nudity.
Okay, so can I elaborate about what happened in Kansas City drag show recently?
No, I'm on a limited time, so actually, I'm sorry, I will say no unless we get more time. The show that caused a stir this weekend that maybe sparked this hearing happening today, do you think that your bill would touch that?
Probably not. No.
Okay, and you don't think your bill would touch
No. Now,
drag
I have
story
my
time?
own personal feeling about drag performances and the very nature of it and the beginning of it, but that's the bill here does not reflect
Well,
my personal
I would simply
feelings about
encourage
that.
you to look into the whole conversation about prurient interest, and if in fact these met the definitions of obscenity, they would actually already be regulated the same way as a strip club.
Okay, then why did the police protect the event in Kansas City that did have that kind of content instead of arresting people?
Because of fears of retaliation.
Well, that's terrible.
Protecting people is what they actually
Protecting
did.
kids should have been priority.
And I haven't seen any examples of it actually meeting the definition
I
of
could read them
obscenity,
off
but-
to you.
Was there nudity?
Oh, yeah.
Well, then it might have been regulated differently, but that's not what you're talking about here. And that's the problem. If that's already illegal, it's already illegal and we don't need a bill. Representative Boyd, switching to yours. So as Representative Velasquez said, so right now, I think this is the same conversation you were having with Representative Engel, but I wasn't sure of your answer. Do you actually think that a performance of Peter Pan, for example, is given, or a live production of La Cage aux Folles, or Mrs. Doubtfire, Hairspray, any of these things, that they should not be, that kids should not be allowed to see those shows?
You know, the bill at hand that I'm talking about are drag shows, not Broadway performances. My bill is just preventing minors from attending drag shows.
Okay, but your definition of what a drag show is simply says that the performer is exhibiting a gender that is different from their biological sex as assigned at birth, using clothing, makeup, or other physical markers. That's every Shakespeare show just about that I've ever seen where characters dress up as the opposite sex and go get into all kinds of complicated stories. Is that something that kids should not be allowed to see? Is that a drag show?
Like I said, I believe that children should not be able to attend a drag show.
So you just don't want to answer whether you think that qualifies as your definition of a drag show?
I don't believe Shakespeare is the
Okay.
same as a drag show.
Well, I appreciate that answer because your definition says otherwise, and I would encourage you to change that. You also said that your whole purpose here was just to make sure that kids can't see drag shows, but you actually categorize them as an existing adult cabaret and sexually oriented business.
Correct.
which have a whole lot more restrictions on them than just whether or not kids can attend. Are you aware of that?
What restrictions are you referring to?
Well, even Representative Baker mentioned a number of them with zoning restrictions and where they can be located, licensing requirements in a lot of places. Some places, I think they're straight out banned. I don't think they can exist in St. Louis City, for example. Is your intention to treat anywhere that has a drag show, anywhere that has drag story time, anywhere that has any drag performers performing, that place should be subject to the same limitations as a strip club?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Further questions? Representative McMullen,
Permission to inquire.
proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, Representative Baker, I'm from the Kansas City area, and I've currently heard about an instance called the KC Mo Drag Queen Christmas. And there's some instances of some...
Sorry to interrupt you, Representative. We're having a little hard time hearing you. Thank you.
Sorry. As you know, I'm from the Kansas City area, and I heard there was an instance called the KC Mo Drag Queen Christmas. Can you go into that? Can you elaborate on some of the instances?
I can do that. And I'll preface this too with the fact that this is about protecting kids from adult content for me and my bill. That's what I'm trying to get at. I never cared about drag queen events until kids started getting invited and kids ended up being invited to participate in these shows, such as stuffing money in the underwear of the performer. I have a problem with that, and I have videos and pictures that show this stuff. Now, some of these things happen in different places, but this is specifically from the Kansas City, Missouri Drag Queen Christmas. Even the tip jar that was there, that was used for people to put money in, was sexual, labeled with the words, "Put the tip in, see how it feels." Advertisements read this: "All ages welcome, warning, adult content." They were simulating sex in the show. They were talking sexual things to the crowd. They were sexualizing children's stories in this event. I have videos including very sexually explicit content of nude or semi-nude performers dancing, gyrating, simulating sex acts while interacting with children in attendance. Song titles at this event: "Tits in a Box," an audience member spanking the person. Asking a child in attendance, "Are you reaching for my breasts? Are you hungry?" Asking a child in attendance. Men in kink harnesses grabbing their genitalia while simulating intercourse. One performer asked, "Are you having fun? Are you enjoying it?" Asking a child, "Are you confused yet? Are you confused yet?" I won't go into my personal feelings about some of this and the origins of it, but this is to children's ages 9 and 10 that they were asking that question. Chesterfield, Missouri, same Christmas-themed drag event was scheduled as all ages, but there were pushback, if you guys remember, in the news media, and they changed it to an adult event. I have no problem with that. I don't like it. I'm not going to attend it. I don't agree with it. I'm just not going to go. But whatever they do, they can do. But when they started introducing kids to this and bringing kids to those kind of events with that kind of content, I think most people would agree that's a problem. And I think we need to shore up our statute to reflect that. Columbia last week, kids were taken without parents knowing what exactly was taking place. I don't think there was adult content as far as what would meet the criteria of what I'm getting at in this bill, but I have a serious problem with schools, which are taxpayer funded, taking our kids to these kind of events and not notifying exactly what they're going to. So many other instances of drag show events, I've got piles of papers and videos and pictures and everything at libraries, public spaces, restaurants where children were allowed and even participated. So that's the kind of thing that caused me to file this bill. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. We're now going to move into the public hearing portion where witnesses will be able to come up and testify. Before I do that, how many people are here to testify on this bill? As a reminder, there are witness forms on the witness stand. Everyone, please fill out a witness form when you come and testify. And if you want to make a record on both of these bills, be sure to testify on both of those, or be sure to fill out 2 witness forms. First, I'm going to have if there's a star or expert witness, lead witness testifying on behalf of the bill, for that person to come forward at this time. Is there anyone to testify in support of the bill? Seeing none. Is there anyone to testify in opposition to the bill?
Is this my moment? Good evening, folks. How many of you have never seen a drag queen before? Can I just get a quick show of hands? Thank you for watching drag shows. Okay. Good evening. How does this work?
Press the little button. There'll be a little
Okay.
green light that turns on.
Yes. Woo! I said good evening, but I really mean good morning. My given name is Sean Stokes, and my drag name is Akasha Royale. I am here in fabulous opposition of House Bills 494 and 498. So here's the deal, folks. You've heard a lot of things. I'm going to scrap half the stuff that I said. I hope this is at least entertaining for you, since you've saved drag queens until after midnight. 21 days ago, I was walking through these halls in drag as an entertainer. Today I am back to fight for my right to continue being a drag queen in public. So since 2008, I've performed all over the state of Missouri and in so many incredible communities, both big and small. There's been an underlining need to see diversity and LGBTQ representation. In my time, I've been called many things, and quite literally, some of those have been said in these halls today. So, let's go on a little time warp. In 2009, members of the Ku Klux Klan in Springfield, Missouri, called me both racist and anti-gay slurs at our Greater Ozarks Pride Fest. In 2011, I was called a missed opportunity after the devastating tornadoes in Joplin whenever I ran a show there. In 2016, I was an abomination and a sinner in St. Charles. In 2020, as we adjusted to the pandemic, I was called a groomer because I recorded a video of me reading a child's book. All of these painful words have never distorted who I really am. So let me introduce myself to you. My name is Sean Stokes, and as an entertainer, I am Akasha Royale. I'm also Miss Gay St. Louis America, and in like 2 months, in Kansas City, I will hopefully win Miss Gay Missouri America. Originally, I'm from the good old Springfield, Missouri. I moved to St. Louis City about 10 years ago. I'm a compassionate and hardworking son who was instilled with the values of his mother and father. I'm a patient and understanding uncle, and don't let the makeup fool you, a great uncle, who cares for his nieces and nephews. I'm a partner in my relationship of 12 years. I'm a devout Christian, might be shocking to some, and I've actually read the Bible from beginning to end instead of just spouting rhetoric. I am a visionary and a determined leader, both at work and through my philanthropic endeavors. And last but not least, I'm a beacon of hope, a pillar of pride, and a symbol of excellence for our LGBTQ community. Not once did I say I was sexually explicit or any other type of monstrosity that a few would like to paint me as. Today, there are 2 words that I want to talk to you about, and they are economic impact. Within our state, we've seen consistent, stagnant economic growth over the years. Our state's ability to attract Fortune 500 companies or upstarts has had a challenging history, and it leaves me with a few questions. Why and where? Why are these companies not coming and investing in Missouri, and where are they actually going? So I've done a lot of thought about that. We've already heard from other testimony that in Kansas City, we have tried to have the World Cup. In St. Louis, we tried to have the Olympics. We can't attract these people because we have to push through legislation quickly so that people would be able to come here and not be discriminated against just because they are who they are, because they are part of our LGBTQ community. If you didn't know, and I hope you do, because it's kind of your job, Missouri ranks 26th in education, 49th in school funding. Great job there. 39th in economic growth. We have witnessed early education enrollment for pre-K dropping by 300,000 kids. Teachers are quitting en masse. We are literally now having school 4 days a week. After-school programs are also struggling to provide for students. For our economy, we have seen 0.2% growth over 5 years. That's not a good success rate, folks. This is a clear indicator that businesses and the workforce are not investing in or coming to Missouri because they view our state as a land in which people cannot achieve the American dream. I've got a whole lot of other things to tell you about economic growth, but I don't think we're going to solve that today. What I do want to address is who I am, where I'm from, what I do, and what realistically happens at these shows. Now, you all said there's only one person who had never seen a drag show, so we're going to talk in a vernacular that you would understand. So I have been performing for 15 years of my life. My niece probably been performing for 47 years. But in that time, I've been able to do a lot of incredible things. I have been a Queen of Pride not only in St. Louis, in Joplin, and also in Springfield. I have represented our America system. If you don't know what that is, it's been around for 49 years, so I'm sorry, Representative Baker and Boyd. Drag's been here a lot longer than you knew.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions, Representative Copeland?
Thank you for coming. I just have an open-end question for everybody that comes up. I think Representative Baker addresses, like he says, he's not worried about what you do on a daily basis, but some of the instances that he gave, do you think that's appropriate to do that to 9 and 10-year-olds of the shows that were done? And that's an open-end question to everybody that testifies.
No, I'm happy to answer that.
I would think that the way you talk, you would say that would be inappropriate to provide that kind of show to them children.
Yeah, so one of my good friends, and you'll probably hear from her later, her name is Dieta Pepsi, recently on a podcast, she said, do they think we're stupid? Do they think we're stupid? Do they think that we don't know how to conduct ourselves appropriately in spaces? And also, the access that we say whenever these kids are coming to these shows is often because the parents already know what's going to happen. The parents are there to protect these kids, and me as an uncle and a great uncle, I'm never going to harm a kid. I've been in this building all day long. I was in this building on January 3rd. I didn't touch a kid. I didn't groom a kid. I didn't sexually do anything explicit with a child. I know how to act whenever I'm around children.
I understand that, but most laws are passed or brought forward for those who don't act in your way. Is that not correct? So that's what I think Representative Baker and them bringing to this is to prevent that kind of show to children. Because I don't think you would actually, the way I understand it, taken from what I just seen already, you don't have that mentality or wanting to hurt children or provide children with that kind of atmosphere. That's where I'm going with that, because there's a group that obviously don't have the same, say, morals or ethics as you do when you do your show.
Yeah, so let's just note on the facts that I've already provided you. So drag has been at its easiest form through pageantry here in this state for 49 years. If you don't know anything about drag pageantry, it's kind of like real girl pageantry. We wear the crowns. We wear the gowns. We don't wear the swimsuits, thank God. But it's been here for such a long time, and there's never been a threat towards anyone.
Well, will you answer the question as far as, do you think that was appropriate if the facts that Representative Baker brought at that show in Kansas City, would that be an appropriate drag show to provide to children? That's all I'm asking, if you think that was an appropriate show, if the facts that he brought to us are accurate.
If they are facts, I would love to see them. Whatever this catalog is of drag paraphernalia, I would love to see it, because the experience that I've had, especially with those drag queen Christmas shows, with people who get paid a heck of a lot more than me, they aren't crossing those lines and they aren't engaging in that behavior. So I've not witnessed that. Maybe he's going to another type of drag show on the other side of the street that I've never been invited to.
I think he has video, but we're just trying to get to
I'd love to
them
see it.
people that do that.
Share
we don't
it.
want that to happen.
I want to see it.
I don't think they want to stop your show from going on to adults. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't get to pick sorry, I normally host drag shows, so I get to pick who talks on the mic and who doesn't.
Quaid.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for being here. We've spent a lot of time today talking about youth and our concerns for youth. And throughout all of the bills that we've heard, we've talked a lot about the increased rates of suicide attempts or actual successful suicides within the LGBT youth population. We know, we've all heard the stats all day today. I would like you to give an anecdotal story or perspective from when you perform and you have an interaction with an LGBT youth who it might be the very first time that they see someone in drag, how that makes them feel, how they convey themselves to you when it comes to their safety mentally. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
I've noted on it already that I'm an uncle and a great uncle, and I want to tell you about a time when I have ensured that my niece was not safe, and when I have ensured that she was safe while I was in drag. We used to ride bikes a lot whenever we were kids, and we would go down this hill over and over again, and it was getting dark and late, and we decided that we were going to do it one more time. Gabe flipped off her bike, and a rock went in her forehead, and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't a drag queen at that time, which might have helped because I could have had more fabric to make a tourniquet, but I cared for her then. Fast forward to whenever she was celebrating her 21st birthday, she came to the first drag show she was able to see me in at that time because the bars didn't allow it before then. And we didn't have Drag Queen Story Hours or any of those other things or festivals that she could attend. And it was the first time that she saw me in my full authenticity. I know that the crown and the wig and the suit and the strut and the voice and the jewelry and the makeup is a lot. But it is a part of who I am, and it is a part of my authenticity. It is me expressing myself in a creative form. It is me utilizing my ability to barely paint, to be creative in fashion, and to choreograph wonderful numbers, and to sometimes, I think so, be a comedian. Those moments that I've been able to share with my family members, both those that have been at a legal age and those that have been younger, have been some of the most magnificent moments in my life. I actually have a sister-in-law, and recently she brought her kid to Barquet, where we had a drag competition for dogs and for the kids to be able to witness. It is a safe place where parents are there, where they get to monitor their kids, be there with their dogs, and see our art form. It is somewhat indescribable and also inspiring.
Thank you for that. I go to drag shows a lot. I'll be very quick, Mr. Chair. And my children do attend some things with me as well. I will say as a parent, you know, again, we talk a lot about parents' rights in this building, trusting parents to be able to make those choices. You know, parents take kids to rated R movies. They take them to lots of things that I would not feel is appropriate for my children to see. I don't let my 8-year-old watch rated R movies, nor did I let my teens when they were before the age of 17. But that's my choice, right? But what I wanted to say, going back to the rates of kiddos who are at risk, I've seen those interactions with children for the first time to be able to see someone dressed in drag. And I've seen them cry, and I've seen them break down in tears of joy because for the first time, they see someone who they feel safe with. And I just want to thank you and all of the other performers here and folks who engage in that because you're saving lives. And I would rather us be having the conversations about how to save these lives than what we've been doing today.
Thank you. And to piggyback off of that, for the past 9
I'm going to have to cut it off there. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to move on to the next witness in opposition and come forward and proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Hi, Mom. Good morning, everyone. Can y'all say it back? Yes, thank you. My name is David Hall, or my drag name is Casey Adams. I am the current Miss Gay City of Columbia, America, along with my sister, Akasha Royale. If you don't know me, or if you can't recognize from what I'm wearing, I am one of the 3 queens that sparked the huge backlash at Columbia for the diversity breakfast. And I want to talk to you about my process preparing for that performance. I got a message from Inclusion Plus back in December saying, hey, we have this really great opportunity for you guys, especially David as Miss Gay Columbia. This is going to be great for you. It's diversity. This is something you strive for. It's family friendly. So make sure that your songs are uplifting and empowering and does not have any curse words, and that you dress appropriately. As someone that is also an actor, a designer, a stepfather, I know what to do in that situation. I'm like, what would I want my kids to see? What would I want my kids to see me perform? And so I chose songs as well as my sisters, and we did Hold On by Wilson Phillips. Apparently, some straight white people do not like Hold On by Wilson Phillips, because as we were walking through the audience, there was a lot of love, but then there was also those few people that just looked me dead in the eyes, kind of like this sir is looking at his phone. They didn't want to pay attention. They didn't want to make eye sight with me. But what I was able to talk with them about was that I strive for racial and LGBTQ diversity and inclusivity in everything that I do. And as a mentor, not only to my kids, but as to other youth in the city, I want to see them thrive. And I do not want them to see me in any bad light. So seeing the Attorney General, Caleb Browden, which I'm going to guess he's never been to a drag show, the same as Governor Parson. For them to label what they saw on Libs of TikTok, which is not a credible source at all, to have them label us as adult entertainment and adult sexual performances endangering minors. I really would like you all to look at my jumpsuit. I'll give you another little turnaround real quick and see what about this is showing off anything sexual. I'll give you a moment to appreciate the jumpsuit. Here it is. The only actual skin you can see is neck up, hands, and the bottom of my feet if you look real close, because I'm wearing dancer tights that you can see the bottom of the foot. So I don't really see how a G-rated performance, which apparently doesn't fit the bills that are being proposed, but they are, because that's why wouldn't they be pushed? Thank you all. I'm open to questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Representative Copeland.
I'll ask the same questions before. The bill that Representative Baker brought forward is for pornography, nudity, and it sounds like the Columbia thing that you went to did not provide that. Do you approve of that kind of drag show to children is all I ask. That's just a generic question that I want to ask each and every one of you. If there was nudity in children, do you agree with that?
So with a drag show, you will rarely see nudity.
I know that, but I'm asking you your opinion on if that was inappropriate for that age group to have drag do nudity. It's just a yes or no question.
Well, it's more than a yes or no question.
Do you believe that nudity should be provided to children at a drag show?
No, but then at the same time, there is ballets that
I just think Representative Baker's bill is addressing that kind of a performance from a drag show.
So then that would open the question: if what defines drag?
Well,
if it's putting on features that are.
I think he's defined what kind of drag to children would not be provided, but you can provide it to an adult in any form or fashion you like. We're just addressing the performances you're talking about. I do not feel his bill would affect you or you on that type of show. I think if you want to put an upstanding drag show on to adults, any fashion you want, but when you get into children, I think we're just addressing the children and below. I mean, I don't think he wants to stop you from doing drag.
I disagree.
I think that bill goes to where children and below certain things should not be provided. I think that's the only question I have. And you have the right to do what you want, but we just need to make sure them shows don't go too far with our children.
The biggest thing is also the parents. The parents also have to be very mindful. They have to do the research themselves. They can't just fully just let their kids go off.
Pretty simple. If you agree with nudity to children is all I was asking.
No, I don't agree to nudity to children, but then that also opens up, if he's wanting it just don't let kids see nudity in drag shows. That also, or he's saying that drag shows only provide nudity, then that opens up, what about dancers? What about ballet? What about theater? What about men in Shakespeare, or like Representative Ingalls saying with Peter Pan?
That I think he was pretty forward with, this is what he was trying to prevent from happening to our children. I don't think he would, I think he even said Shakespeare and them weren't necessarily included in what his intent was. I just want to get that forward, is I don't think his bill is directed towards you if you're doing drag shows to adults. So, and I appreciate you coming, so thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Meredith.
To inquire.
Proceed.
First of all, thanks for being here. Thanks for explaining a little bit about the variety of shows that you do. First of all, I want to be clear. Intent is not what matters in the law. Mm-hmm. The words on the paper are what matter. But we also have one bill here where I think, were you here a moment ago when the other bill sponsor said that very specifically, even a storytime drag show with no nudity, certainly, or even particularly adult jokes or adult humor, would still be something that she would want to treat like a strip club. In your experience, are your shows when you're working with kids anything like going to a strip club?
Absolutely not. So a fun fact about me, I was adopted in Kansas. My biological mother was a stripper. So my adopted mom growing up, when I went into dancing, and then as I started getting into drag, she goes, well, you must have learned your flexibility from your mom. And I've never personally been to a strip club because I have no need. As a bisexual man with a partner, there's no need for me to go. But I also know about it because I have friends, people talk. And when I've done family-friendly shows, I usually do Disney because who doesn't love Disney? And I always wear appropriate clothing. The most you'll see is maybe a shoulder, which I know in some places around here, that's a big no-no. Yeah. So I always, you're never going to see a bare leg from me because I wear 4 layers of tights, padding, and a shaper.
The nudity wouldn't even be an option at an adult show.
Not for me, not for a lot of queens
and you
in
also
Missouri.
Know, with that experience, that if there were nudity, it would already be regulated differently.
Correct.
And illegal in most of these contexts. That's already the law.
Yes.
So if it's really nudity, we're worried about. Now, if we're instead worried about lewd jokes, lewd humor. You've seen many PG Disney movies lately? Because there's a lot of lewd humor that goes over kids' heads. Mm-hmm. That's not even in a PG rated or PG-13 rated movie. Not to mention, like we talked about, PG-13
Correct.
or R movies, which might have some far more troubling things for kids to see than jokes about sex that might make someone clutch their pearls. I guess there's a range of shows you'll perform, and this is true for any artist or a comedy club, anything you go to, where there are adult versions of the show, there are kids versions of the show, and there are hybrids that might get in the middle. And really, when parents decide to take a kid to that show, they're making a decision of what they're comfortable exposing their kid to. But as long as it's not a strip club, our obscenity laws don't come into play, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that parents struggle with is not doing their own research. If there's parents that get offended with drag queens, do the research. Do the research about the shows that their kids are interested in going to. Do the research about who's performing. And that also opens up to be like, okay, there's people that do strictly adult-only shows because that's their demographic. For someone like me that also is in the theater world, in the music theater world, I know there's going to be a lot of people that know me in that world that want to come see me in the drag world. And a lot of them are youth. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do the same numbers that I'm going to do for a 21 and up club versus a 16-year-old because that's not okay.
Thanks. I'm going to cut you off there. Time's expired. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to ask the next witness in opposition to come forward.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Chairman Riley, Vice Chair Hicks, and Ranking Member Engel, and all those on this committee. My name is Brandon Banks. I'm one of the co-founders of Inclusion, Inc. We produce LGBTQIA educational and entertainment events for our community. I'm an entrepreneur that fights to stimulate our economy and provide jobs. I'm also a cisgender man that identifies as gay. Born in a world that hated me, I hid, I listened, I learned, and I cried silently, and I built myself internally so that one day I would be strong enough to live my life out loud authentically. And this week, I felt my stomach churn, and I suffered flashbacks of all of the moments when my peers, and the adults in my life then, and the society that I lived in, chastised and deprecated me and the LGBTQ community, the community that I was a silent part of. I'm silent no more. I've heard the battle cry, and I want to respond. Today, I represent myself, the LGBTQ safe and affirming workplaces, diverse entrepreneurs, and many out and proud people. But I'm also here representing myself and all of the voices of people that can't be here, and the ones that have yet to come out, and the ones that you're most afraid of. The kids who were or are like me. No law you put in place will ever make someone not gay. You can't pass laws to change how individuals handle their lived gender experience or self-identity expression. You can't pass laws that will eliminate us from history or existence. We are here. 2 complaints were received from parents wanting to control the content of the city's message of diversity. What if those complaints were about the female keynote speaker's multiple references to her wife, or the inclusion of multiple faith-based messages that we all sat there and were part of and participating in? Drag is not inherently sexual. Can people make it sexual? They sure can. That's a creative choice. From circumstance to circumstance, situation to situation, entertainer to entertainer. Are all movies or songs or art pieces sexual? Nope. Can they be? Well, of course. Some, like Michelangelo's sculpture of David and many other sculptures of paintings, feature nudity. I remember learning about anatomy in school during science class. Was that sexual? We specifically scheduled performers committed to sharing a general audience-rated, family-friendly, uplifting, inclusive message during a diversity breakfast. These bills are built to limit opportunities, ostracize individuals, and are contributing to the extreme damage of mental health stability in adults and youth across our entire nation, not just here in Missouri. Did you know 45% of our youth contemplate or attempt suicide, and having just one affirming adult can save their life? Did you know that students in LGBTQ affirming schools experience lower suicide rates, consideration, and attempt rates? Being included saves lives. There are many representations of diversity at that breakfast, racial, religious, and cultural, including drag performances which celebrated another group being authentic to their own identities. Diversity is about everyone. It's about learning perspective and unlearning our biases. It's about finding common ground with others despite your differences. I'm opposed to all of these bills today for me, myself, my family, my community, and I oppose the way that they're being brought in such an expeditious manner to this committee. I urge each of you to vote against all of these bills and implore you to be good stewards of your diverse constituencies across Missouri. Vote for no hate in this state, please.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Representative Reuter.
Just an inquiry.
Proceed.
So you were part of this breakfast that we're hearing about in Columbia last week.
Inclusion Plus was the featured closing entertainment for the Columbia Values Diversity breakfast.
And what was your role in that?
I'm one of the co-founders of the organization, and I am also listed as our Director of Sales and Marketing.
Okay, so were you involved in the Christmas event?
No, that's a unrelated opposite group.
How would you describe? Is there a way that you could differentiate what they're describing happened in Kansas City versus what the type of entertainment that you're providing?
Yeah, what you're asking for requires a lot of framing and context, so I don't know if I'm going to do an exact perfect job of this. But essentially, that's a large national entity that may or may not be regulated by, stage managers on hand. They may have more run of what they want to do, being celebrity drag entertainers that, as Akasha said, are paid umpteens dollars to show up and do, a show. Inclusion Plus takes very seriously how we portray our community, how we impact the people that are in our audience, and what content we put out. We have, at least 5 people on our steering, committee that at any time are reviewing what we are doing, how we are approaching our community, and what we are offering at the end of the day. So in relationship to this, we had meetings where we talked about what is appropriate for an all ages audience. Not to be said that we also we have for the last 3 years been operating as a business, launching all kinds of different LGBTQIA entertainment, and we have never had any parent come back and say this was sexualized, this was sadistic, this was a bad, ill influence on my child. And moreover, I think to the representative's note here in the front, she brings her children to drag shows because she as a parent says having them exposed to inclusive environments and people that share supportive culture is important to save their life, to make them feel accepted, to help them see who they are and see other people like them exist and be happy and productive and committing members of our society. Did I do okay? Because, that's a national entity that I can't do anything about controlling, and we have a very tight grip on how we try to produce content.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate your time.
Other questions from the committee? Okay, we'll move on to the next witness. Next witness in opposition, please come forward.
Good morning, Jefferson City! I'm going to make this as brief as humanly possible because I have about 6.5 hours before I have to be up again working for the state. Yes, I am a state employee and I'm very happy to be here at the state. Woot. All right, so I am in a corset. I am in 6-inch heels. Obviously, I care very much about this and I'm very passionate about it, especially since I just found out about it earlier this morning. So, not this morning, yesterday morning, excuse me. I am very confused. I've been here for 7 hours. Okay. My name is Connor Thompson, aka Autumn Equinox. I am a drag performer. I perform drag storytime at both Skylark Bookstore in Columbia, Missouri, and the Dandelion Cafe in Ashland, Missouri. Since drag storytimes began, drag performers at these storytimes have been subject to physical violence, online violence, and I personally have had to deal with the continued trauma of having drag story times and drag performances in general geared towards children correlated to childhood sexual abuse. And as a victim of childhood sexual abuse, that is triggering on so many levels. We need to be teaching children that otherness is okay. We have to teach them from a young age. We need to teach them that Black lives matter, that trans lives matter, and that drag queens are the best gateway to that. And I'm going to use a personal reference for this. I have known I was gay since I was 3 years old. And I did not know that it was okay to be gay until I saw the film Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, when I was 6 years old. That film featured 3, at the time, could be considered the most masculine men on the planet, John Leguizamo, Patrick Swayze, and Wesley Snipes. Woot. Portraying gay men and drag queens and what modern people might consider to be trans performances as well, not in a way that made fun of them, not in a way that persecuted them, but in a way that celebrated them. Now, yes, these were cisgendered, heterosexual men, but in the 90s, that was such a celebration to me. And to have drag defined to me as someone who was born with too much fashion sense for one gender gave my little non-binary heart the spirit to keep going. Through my parents' divorce, through continued sexual trauma, and countless abuses. Now, I'm not going to, quote statute, even though I probably could because I work for the state. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm a medical anything. I'm not a child psychologist. I am just a drag queen who has met children who appreciate what I do and to love what I do and see it as a gateway and a beacon for what they could be in the future, just like Tu Wong Fu was for me. I thank the body.
Any questions from the committee? Representative Mathieson.
All right. Indulge me for, I'm going to really try to make this only, whoops. All right. I'm really going to try to condense this down to 3 minutes. Number one, I see you and everybody else here as human beings. I see you as adult entertainers, and I love the entertainment that I've been exposed to in my life. Anyway, now as a banquet manager, I have hosted, because you've rented a space, your community has rented space for my hotel to have competitions, it's late at night, whatever the competitions are. And I've watched the shows, all right? Seen a whole lot of hilarious humor, a whole lot of sexually suggestive dancing, everything that many adults love. I thought it was hilarious, and watched many dollar bills thrown up on the stage, which happens in certain adult situations. As an adult, going out with friends, I've been to the Grove, I've been to the bars, I've been to Naughty Girl. I've seen many different, great adult performances. My contention is I just have a really hard time separating the adult performances to what's appropriate for a kid. When I hear the bill sponsors, list of conversations, activities, with a 9 or 10-year-old child, if all of that's true, that breaks my heart. That makes me angry because my son's 10 years old. And as a father, I don't bring him to such activities.
Which is your right.
Which is my right, So I guess it's more about, to me, access. For instance, so I'm looking around. I called a venue in St. Louis, hosting a show on February 19th, and I said, hey, can I buy tickets for myself and my son? And February 19th. They said, well, sure, absolutely you can. And then, somebody, that person was like, but, do you really want to? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, have you been to a drag show before? I mean, I know it's brunch, but there's going to be a whole lot of adult humor and a whole lot of sexual stuff going on. Are you sure you want to bring a kid? And I said, I appreciate you letting me know. I'll think about it and call you back. So I'm looking around at ways that our kids could be exposed. Now, only a moron parent would show up to this show not anticipating the entertainment that's going to be provided. I'll just cut the BS and say that right out. But I also love tacos. Like, my kid loves tacos. I love tacos. And if I was eating tacos, not expecting this show,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's 3 minutes, so I think we'll have to end on I love tacos. With that, we're going to move on to the next witness in opposition.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Melody Ortloff. I am a constituent, a taxpayer, a licensed insurance agent, and a drag performer. I've been performing as a drag king in Kansas City for 7 years. I would wager that many of you have never heard of a drag king. We exist alongside non-binary performers, female drag queens, male drag kings, transgender performers, straight performers, and performers who don't fit the rigid mold of king or queen drag. These bills, 494 and 498, are, I believe, utterly absurd. You wish to classify drag performances as sexually oriented and adults only, like a strip club. Drag performers are not comparable to strippers, and you will never see one nude on a stage, despite what Mr. Copeland, Representative Copeland, is asking. There is not nudity at drag shows. And the queens mentioned that they are covered in 5 to 10 layers of pantyhose, padding, corsets, all before actual clothing. But I'll move on from that. But not only are these bills absurd and out of touch, they will put gay bars and gay-friendly restaurants out of business. If these types of establishments are going to be reclassified as sexually oriented business, It will put an undue hardship on the owners of such small businesses. I believe that was brought up earlier, that there's a lot more regulations on sexually oriented businesses. Aren't many of you in the party that supposedly supports business? Not to mention, numerous performers who make their living through drag will be negatively impacted. If these bills are supposed to protect the children, they are moot point. Bars are 21 or over most of the time. There may be a few that are 18 and over, but even so, there won't be minors there. So any performance at a bar would be out of the eyesight of minors. Family-friendly drag shows or restaurants or Pride would be very careful to keep their content and performances PG in nature. I know several performers whose performances are at a bar are very sexual in nature. I'm not going to admit that they're not, but that's at a bar. And then when they perform at a family-friendly show, it's a Hamburger Mary's, they tone down and they become much more PG, and they choose their songs, they choose their outfits wisely. I will say, as for myself, I don't perform like sexually suggestive material. I am not comfortable with that. I perform a lot of comedy, do a lot of Weird Al. People love it. And I do a lot of country music, what's more wholesome than country music, for the most part. But again, I'm going back to the point that this would essentially make Pride illegal. And perhaps that's an intended purpose in the bills, or maybe that's an unintended side effect. But saying that drag performances on public property would be considered an adult cabaret would make Pride against the law. And we all know how that will go. I believe that these bills are not so thinly veiled attack on the LGBTQ plus community. They're attacking a problem where none exists. And one last sentence, do you want to take us back to pre-Stonewall era, where police were checking the genitalia of performers who were perceived to be dressing outside of their assigned gender? Any questions?
Thank you, Representative Ani. Yes. Proceed.
Briefly, I'm curious because I feel like we're trying to delineate here the difference between what's appropriate for kids and what's not. And I think we all understand it, and I feel like we're talking across each other or past each other, because what I'm hearing is essentially the equivalent of if you were to say, I'm a dancer. Well, to some, that may mean an exotic dancer on a pole for adults only. For others, it may mean ballet, jazz, tap. We understand, the performers understand when their audience is filled with adults, what they can do, and when it's filled with children, what they can do, correct?
Correct. And I would also make the point again that parents are with these kids. They're not just kids wandering into a restaurant on their own.
Kids aren't wandering into drag shows.
No, they're not. And the parents, it's the same as I believe someone else mentioned. Some parents will take their kids to R-rated movies. I mean, I know I know adults who grew up watching very R-rated movies from very young ages at home on their VHS tapes. Yes, I am old. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. We're going to move to the next witness in opposition. Please come forward and proceed whenever you're ready.
Hello. I've been here for a very long time, as you all have, so thank you for being with us. Sorry it's going so long. My name is Maxie Glamour. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I am a drag artist. I'm not only a drag artist, I'm a costume designer, a musician, a producer, a taxpayer, a homeowner, and a pretty decent member of society. When I was about 17 years old, I started dressing up in different genders' clothes. My mother kicked me out. I was living outside of my car, and the drag community was the only community that would take me in. Homeless for most of my life, the drag community really helped create a sense of identity. They helped create financial stability. And, for the last 14 years, I performed and produced events internationally. I've worked with every single major institution in the city of St. Louis, every museum, every college, and most public libraries. So your taxpayers' money is going to me. Thank you. And as I look through this, I'm constantly bombarded with racism, homophobia, and transphobia from very ignorant and misinformed, erroneous facts. And so when we're looking at the livelihood of humans that spend decades learning a multitude of disciplines to perfect their craft, they're completely delegitimized by people who are trying to pretty much just produce homophobia and transphobia. And so while we are creating a genuine income, these oppressive laws are constantly bombarding us, and this is having negative psychological implications on us. And this is resulting in a higher rate of opioid epidemics in our cities and our counties. We also have a higher rate of meth addiction in our countries, and I don't see that being brought up at all today. I think we're talking about drag, which is unfortunate because I think that if you're wanting to make sure that the basic needs of the humans in our state are met, maybe you should not combat people who are trying to make a decent living, who are paying your salaries, who are making sure that your bad hair jobs get a place to sit down at. And so as we're constantly dodging these regressive, harmful rhetoric and policy and this inflammatory messaging based on infactual information, it's just sparking irrational fears. These fears are the basis of ignorant bigotry, and that brought us here today. And none of us want to be here at 1 a.m. talking about stupid laws to ban drag. And so while we are here, I would love if you all can make sure that you have the basic needs of Missourians met so that we are not constantly told that we would do better in New York, that we would do better in LA, because I love my city, I love my state, and I'm not going any fucking where. Any questions?
Representative Meredith.
Junquar.
Proceed.
Thank you. So it's late, it's 1:20. I can tell listening to you that your righteous anger here is pretty palpable, and I understand it, and I'm sorry. I empathize. But I also want to say, you look incredible. And I say that not just, as a statement that you look incredible, but I'm looking at the detail and the work and the artistry that went into everything about how you're presenting yourself right now. And if anybody in this room doubts that drag is a form of artistic expression that is extremely well protected by the First Amendment in our country, I think all they have to do is look at you. And so I appreciate you sticking through to this point, as angry as it might be making you, as much as it might be filling you with rage. Thank you for sticking it out. Thank you for showing your art to us and being here to testify. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think if more people had friends that were drag queens, they would be committing less fashion faux pas.
Thank you for your testimony. Next in opposition, please come forward.
She's back. Hi, it's Jordan Braxton again. And I'm here talking from, I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Pride St. Louis. And I just want to say that I have been doing drag since I was special entertainment at the Last Supper. Akasha said earlier that I was on a podcast and said, y'all think we're stupid. These bills presume that we're stupid. We know what absurdity and nudity is. We know I am Disney Diana during the day. When I see children in the audience, I know I can't say the same things as I used to say at Faces at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And y'all think this is late? Oh no, honey, this is not late. Late is doing drag at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I can be here all night to talk to you all, and I want to talk to you all. And I'm here to oppose bills HB494 and HB498. I'm the epitome of the intersectionality of these bills that are being introduced today. Did you know that trans people do drag? Earlier I told you I was a transgender woman and I do drag. Yes, trans people do drag. Women do drag. Men do drag. Intersex people do drag. All people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, can do drag. The philosophy of belief that drag queens are men is an archaic belief. I am a former beauty queen. I was Miss Gay Missouri 1991, and I'm a 9-time state Missouri title holder. One of my former sisters, who was a Miss Gay Missouri, was a cisgender, heterosexual, married man. I'm going to say that one more time. He was a cisgender, heterosexual, married man with children. He used his legal name, not his drag name, while performing. Drag is a creative expression of oneself. It's like most other forms of expression, like art, dance, spoken word, sculpturing, wood carving. Drag is one of the many creative ways I express myself. Cooking is another way of my creativity. I love making beautiful food. I love when people eat my food and they smile. Drag does the same thing for me. You wouldn't have me stop or tax my cooking just because you didn't agree with my form of creativity. I also raise millions of dollars for charities in St. Louis, not only for LGBT charities, but non-LGBT charities as well. Alzheimer's Association, Susan B. Comer, and also multiple sclerosis. So these bills would, for any establishment that I worked at to raise money for these charities for people in need, would be designated sexually explicit businesses subject to zoning laws. I just want to say just a couple of quick things, Mr. Chairman. I move right along. Just look around. You asked for someone to support this bill. There was no one here to support it. Chris Sanders no longer supporting this bill. So that should tell you right there how absurd this bill is. Earlier, Representative Boyd said, don't take your kids to drag shows, don't take your kids to strip clubs. How about don't take your kids to Hooters?
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will move to the next witness in opposition. Thank you.
Oh, Lord, it's early. Hello. How y'all doing? So my legal name is Eric McCarty. My drag name is May Onays. Like the spreadable condiment. Yes, thank you. I'm white. That's why they gave it to me. So yeah, looking at me is a little much. Most of the people here have seen a drag queen, Typically somebody that's clean shaven, pretty hair. Hair's a big one. So I'm not that. So what your definition of drag does not apply to me. We actually have our own pageant in Missouri. So Miss Bearded Queen, we have our own pageant. So, limiting ideals of drag to biological markers that adorn your biological sex. I was born male. I have a beard. So what about that makes this drag? It's a thin-veiled idea that's not going to go through, I'm going to be honest. Work on it, sweetheart. But, so something I want to talk about. So my first Pride was St. Louis. I was 16. I had hair. It was great. I was blonde. I saw a drag queen for the first time, and I lit up. I grew up in Sturgeon, Missouri. I don't know if any of you know where that's at. I didn't think so. It's 30 minutes north of Columbia, 800 people, 8 churches. Loved it. Was in a puppet group. So the idea of seeing someone that was not straight white was wild. So going ahead and seeing that queen at 16 inspired me and showed me. And I started to say, I'm going to answer the open-ended question early. No. What I heard of from what was proposed, I would not agree with, but I don't also need to see receipts because it's the show me state, honey. Talking about it ain't doing nothing until I see it. But regardless, we know how to act. We know how to do things. We know how to separate the ideas of adult only versus children. I have a niece. I love her dearly. I love my sister. I love my family. I know that I shouldn't show any part of myself to them, so I know not to do that with your kids. And like we're saying, though I'm not wearing tights, it's hot in here. I'm in a gown. I wear 5 pairs of tights, 2 pads, 2 pairs of underwear, 1 bra,
and at least a floor-length gown, if not a denim dress. You're not seeing my skin unless you're looking at my neck. And good for you. It's good skin every now and then. But that's all I got. So I would like to go home. I live in Columbia, so I'm open to questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Anyone else to testify in opposition to the bill?
Hello, good morning. It has been a long day. My name is, I'm going against the Bill 494. My name is Felicia Kempen. I am with Unity is Power, STL. I am here today because I cannot believe the disgusting display of how our elected officials are trying to run these bills under the public's nose. Some of these bills have been out for less than a month. We ask you, what is your hurry? Why are you so quick to trying to produce these bills? We wait months for bills to pass to help with the betterment for the people of this state, from better health care to helping the homeless, to bettering our public schooling, to which we actually owe the children, and to the police brutality against our black brothers and sisters that we see and hear about every day. But this is what you're fighting for. We ask you why. You are our public servants. You are here for the people of this state. Am I not a person here? Let me tell you what I know. We are just as human as you are. We deserve just as many rights as you do. It will never be enough until people do not have to come in here and advocate as to why their lives should matter to you. You will never know how it feels one day to wake up and see that your right to your own body and person have been stripped away from you. How your life is a political talking point to be joked about. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. Each person on this planet deserves the right to choose how they want to live their lives. We don't have much time alive here, and we aren't hurting anyone. Think of the faces that you have come to see in this room today. These people and thousands more like them are willing to fight for the rights of all people to live their lives authentically. And they're willing to take time out of work to be here today. We are at a precipice in this nation. What side of history do you want to be on? So you think about that, because this will not be the last time you see us. You will hear us, you will listen, and we will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else to testify in opposition to the bill? Come forward and proceed when ready.
Good morning, y'all. I told you we would make it. And I have to go all the way back to Kansas City, remember, in the snow. So, hello again, third time. My name is Debbie Jackson. I'm here in opposition to HB 494 and 498. And this time I'm going to read. When the outrage over drag performers reading books to children first cropped up, I was one of many people who rolled our eyes because we simply cannot fathom what is so frightening about children sitting in front of a person wearing bright, flashy clothes and over-the-top makeup. We especially struggle to understand the anger when children were being entertained with books and developing a love of reading and storytelling. If you don't appreciate drag as an art, don't go to a drag show. The solution to this feigned moral crisis and outrage is simple. But like so many of the other bills that we had to discuss today, these bills were written out of disdain and loathing for the existence of LGBTQ people. It's also that simple, and we get it. These bills are written to be purposefully vague. Who gets to decide what is a prurient interest? What exactly does similar entertainers, regardless of whether performed for consideration, mean? That could easily be interpreted by someone who denies the humanity of a transgender person, like many of the people who testified in favor of the earlier bills today. To claim that a trans woman's very presence in public is prurient because they view the trans experience as a sexual one. And it isn't, by the way. And what about acts not performed for consideration? like a transgender student getting a role in a school play or a trans person singing along while attending a concert of their favorite singer, a singer who might very well have some performance attire that bends some gender rules. Harry Styles, if you have young daughters, I guess he's left now. Harry Styles performs in a skirt. I'm pretty sure there are lots of girls here who would like to go see Harry Styles, and what are we going to do about those shows? They'd also bring a lot of money to the state. So some history. In the mid-19th century, laws criminalizing cross-dressing were introduced called masquerading laws, and they really had nothing to do with gender. They were about farmers who were trying to get out of paying taxes by dressing up as Native Americans so that they could claim some of their property and their crops as not being something that could be taxed. But unfortunately, those masquerading laws spread across the United States as a way to punish gender variance. In 1913, a person in Brooklyn who today would likely identify as a trans man was arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison with these laws because the judge believed that she was twisted in her moral viewpoint. In the 1940s and 50s and 60s, arrests became more common. By 1969, police were harassing LGBTQ people regularly based on what they were wearing, and that was one of the main reasons for the well-known Stonewall riots that have already been mentioned, because people were fed up with the threats to their safety and freedom simply for wearing clothing that made them feel comfortable.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, briefly.
Yeah, just can you send us a copy of what you wrote? I'd like to see that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else testify in opposition to the bill? Okay, come forward and proceed whenever you're ready.
Hello. My name is Luke James, and I am 16 years old. I got the opportunity to go to my first Pride event just last fall, where I witnessed my first ever drag show. I didn't see anything that could be even remotely related to a stripper. I thought, I really enjoyed it. And I'm also an artist, and I enjoyed the amount of time and effort that went into their art that they paint onto their faces and put into their outfits. As far as these drag royalty interacting with small children, as far as reading books to them and stuff, of course you wouldn't want a stripper reading the Hungry Caterpillar or something to your child. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. It's not okay. But drag queens, kings, and other royalty, they're not showing excessive amounts of skin. They're dressed up all beautiful, and they're very appealing to the eye most of the time. And what child wouldn't love to see that? It looks straight out of a children's movie. I think it's an incredible thing that children should deserve to witness. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else here to testify in opposition to the bill?
Hello, I'm Ashley Quinn, and I wanted to speak specifically to an event that at the church that I work at National Avenue Christian Church in Springfield, Missouri. We were able to host an event called the Queer Revival. A musician came to us and asked if they could use our church space for this event. It was specifically because so many LGBT people have been harmed by churches, by violent and horrific rhetoric telling people that just who they are, who they love, is somehow sinful or something like that's problematic. And so we were happy to open our doors to this event to be able to allow the queer community to come in and just really take over the space and reclaim space and just do whatever the queer community wanted to do in the space. And there's a number of queer members, trans members of our congregation and staff, but this was a little bit different than that. And we did have drag performers perform in the church, and that was actually Luke's first drag show before the Pride event. And afterwards, as we were having a meeting with our church elders and board members, several of our older gay members who had previously left the church and had left and had felt for a long time. Some of them had dealt with alcoholism for a long time because they had so much self-hate based on what the church had told them when they were children or when they were 20 years old or so. So that the opportunity for them to see their grandkids come to this event and experience queer culture in this way that was everything was affirming and joyous and fun and in a church space was just amazing. And they thought, what if our kids our grandkids rather, 2 generations, what if our grandkids, this is all they ever experience? If they never hear a negative word about themselves in the context of this, if they only know that they are loved and affirmed and celebrated and supported for who they are. We got, like the whole room got tears in our eyes thinking about that, imagining that kind of world, because all of us had older than that generation have 100% experienced people telling us that we're going to hell or that we're terrible people or that we're doing something evil to children just by existing. And so the opportunity that comes with sharing drag with our younger generations is amazing, and trying to cancel it out or trying to claim that just the existence of a man in a dress equals perversion is just really an attempt to erase us from society and from culture, and it's not warranted at all. And the opposite is actually amazing. I just want to mention at the end of one of the Pride drag shows in our town square in Springfield, Missouri, one of the drag queens highlighted the plight of homeless youth and the number of homeless youth that are
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. Questions from the committee, Representative Copeland.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate, I don't know if you was in here earlier, do you agree with sexual implicit material being provided to children at a drag show? That's a yes or no. I don't care
really
about a drag show.
You went out to include drag show. I mean,
no, I'm just saying
sexually
any
explicit
sexual
with children
thing
no,
would be right. So
obviously
that's all I ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I'm pretty sure
sure
we already have laws against that.
And I think that's all that he was trying to do to make sure it clarified that if it did happen at that place, it was taken care of.
And I'm just saying, I think we probably, as Representative Meredith stated, I think we already have laws in the state prohibiting that kind of thing. And I think adding drag show or trying to attach drag performance inherently to something sexually inappropriate is uncalled for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next in opposition, please come forward.
Hi there, my name is Struby Struble. My drag name is Peter Pansy. And I just wanted to come up here to maybe help give some examples of the multitude and complexity of drag. I'm a very nerdy, sign-heavy drag king. You can't see a performance from me without a poster. Often they get ripped up. There's a lot that happens. So I've done anti-oil numbers where we're dressed as skinny polar bears. I've done a Mr. Cellophane number, which I don't know if you're familiar with the musical from Chicago, but it's about Mr. Cellophane. And I was Mr. Cellophane and said really big queer youth. And then all of my co-performers walked by with signs about anti-bullying legislation. Bullying legislation.